When my son died, I told myself the pain would fade with time. Then his best friend called me 4 days after the funeral. "Mr. Brennan, I found something in Michael's office. A USB drive hidden inside his favorite book. You need to see this before anyone else does. And whatever you do, don't tell your daughter-in-law. I think she knows more than she's telling." Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. What could possibly be on that drive? But when I plugged it into my laptop and saw what my son had been secretly recording, my whole world shattered. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. I stood in the cemetery watching the last guests walk to their cars. The Montana sky was gray, heavy with clouds that threatened snow. My wife had been gone for 11 years, and now my only son, my Michael, was in the ground beside her. 42 years old, healthy, strong as an ox, dead from what they called a diabetic coma. He'd been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes just 8 months earlier, and somehow that had killed him. His wife Rachel stood near the parking lot, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She wore a black dress that looked brand new, expensive, the kind of thing Michael always said she spent too much money on. Her brother Kevin stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. They whispered to each other, and I saw Kevin check his watch. They had somewhere to be, apparently. Rachel caught me looking and walked over, her heels sinking slightly into the soft ground. "Dad," she said, touching my arm, "why don't you come back to the house? Kevin's making dinner. We shouldn't be alone right now." I shook my head. "I'll drive myself. Need some time." The truth was, I couldn't stand being around her. Not now. Not until I understood why Michael had called me 2 weeks before he died, his voice shaking, saying he'd found something terrible. Something about Rachel and the ranch. He said he needed to show me proof before he confronted her. He'd promised to drive up that weekend. He never made it. The house felt wrong without Michael in it. It was the house where I'd raised him, the old ranch house my grandfather built in 1923. 300 acres of prime Montana land that had been in my family for 4 generations. Rachel had insisted I stay in the guest room rather than drive back to town in the dark. "We're family, Dad," she'd said, squeezing my hand. Michael would want us to take care of each other. But I noticed things. The way she smiled a little too easily for a grieving widow. The phone calls she took in the bathroom with the door locked. The documents spread across the kitchen table that she swept into a folder when I walked in. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house at 2 in the morning and heard voices from the den. Rachel and Kevin, talking low but urgent. "The insurance payout should clear in 6 weeks, Kevin said, plus the life insurance from his job. That's almost $2 million total." "And the ranch?" Rachel asked. "The old man can't run it alone. Give it 6 months, he'll sign it over or sell. Either way, we win." I moved away before they heard me. My hands were shaking. The next morning, Danny Kowalski called. Michael's best friend since high school, his business partner for the last 15 years. They'd built a successful construction company together, Brennan and Kowalski Custom Homes, known across 3 counties for quality work. Danny's voice was strained on the phone. "Mr. Brennan, I need you to come to the office today. Don't tell Rachel. I found something Michael hid here. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should give it to you." I told Rachel I was meeting with the funeral home about final arrangements. She barely looked up from her phone. "Take your time, Dad. I'll be here." Danny's office was in a converted barn on the edge of Billings. He met me at the door, looked past me at the empty parking lot, then pulled me inside and locked up. "I found this yesterday, cleaning out Michael's desk." He handed me a USB drive and a sealed envelope with my name on it. He hid the drive inside that old copy of To Kill a Mockingbird he always kept on his shelf. Told me months ago it was there, just in case. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter in Michael's familiar scrawl. "Dad, if you're reading this, something happened to me. I know how paranoid this sounds, but I need you to understand what I discovered. Rachel and Kevin have been planning to take everything. The ranch, the business, my life insurance. I found emails between them going back 3 years, before we were even married. She targeted me because of the land, Dad. They want to sell it to that mining company, the one that's been buying up property all over the county. I confronted Rachel last week, told her I knew about the emails, about her and Kevin's plan. She denied everything, but I saw the fear in her face. Since then, weird things have been happening. My insulin pens went missing, then showed up in different places. My blood sugar readings have been all over the place, even when I'm careful. I changed the beneficiary on my life insurance to you last week. She doesn't know yet. I love you, Dad. If I'm gone, please don't let them get away with it. Michael. I read his words 5 times. My boy, who'd taught himself to ride before he could read, who'd built his first tree house at 8 years old, who called me every Sunday without fail, had been afraid, had known something was wrong, and I hadn't been there to help him. Danny was wiping his eyes. I should have done something. He told me he was worried, but I thought it was just marriage problems. I didn't think she'd actually hurt him. I looked at the date on Michael's letter. January 12th. He died January 25th. The USB drive contained everything. Emails between Rachel and Kevin dating back 4 years, before she'd even met Michael. They'd researched him, found out about the ranch, the family history, the mineral rights that could be worth millions to the right buyer. Rachel's job at the real estate agency had given her access to property records across the state. She'd targeted my son like a hunter stalking prey. There were also recordings. Michael had installed a hidden camera in his home office after he got suspicious. I watched footage of Rachel going through his desk, photographing documents, making copies of his passwords. I watched Kevin visit when Michael was at work, the two of them discussing how to pressure me into selling once Michael was gone. The old man's got no one else, Kevin said in one recording. He'll fold within a year. But there was nothing showing how they'd hurt Michael. Nothing proving murder. Just motive, planning, intent. I drove to the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Department that afternoon, asked to speak with whoever handled Michael's case. They sent me to Detective Robert Chen, a sharp-eyed man in his 50s, who listened without interrupting as I spread everything across his desk. Mr. Brennan, he said carefully, I understand your suspicion, but your son's death was ruled natural causes, diabetic ketoacidosis. The medical examiner found no signs of foul play. He was healthy, managed his diabetes perfectly. His doctor said his condition was under control. Chen nodded slowly. That does happen sometimes. Complications that come out of nowhere. My son was murdered. I know it. This evidence proves motive. She targeted him, married him for his money, and killed him when he found out. Chen studied the documents again. This shows possible fraud and definitely suspicious behavior. But it doesn't prove murder. Without evidence of how she might have caused his death, my hands are tied. I left the sheriff's office knowing I was on my own. 41 years as a forensic accountant, the last 20 specializing in fraud investigation for the IRS. I'd helped put away embezzlers, money launderers, and tax cheats. I knew how to follow evidence, how to find what people tried to hide. I just needed time and access. For the next 2 weeks, I played the grieving father perfectly. Let Rachel comfort me, accepted her offers of tea and sympathy, asked her advice about handling Michael's affairs. On the 4th day, I mentioned needing help sorting through Michael's belongings. Of course, Dad, she said. Whatever you need. But her helpfulness was selective. She steered me away from his home office, from the filing cabinet in the garage, from anything that might contain more evidence. I waited, watched, documented. Rachel's pattern became clear. Every Monday and Wednesday afternoon, she drove into town for what she called errands. She was gone for 4 hours each time, came back with one small shopping bag at most. On the second Wednesday, I followed her. She drove to a storage facility on the outskirts of Billings, Unit 37. I parked across the street and watched her enter with an empty duffel bag and leave 20 minutes later with it full. I photographed everything with the camera I'd bought specifically for this purpose. Dates, times, license plates. That evening, Rachel made pot roast for dinner. She seemed relaxed, almost happy. I've been thinking, Dad. She refilled my coffee. This ranch is a lot for one person. Maybe we should talk about selling, splitting the proceeds. You could get a nice condo in town, something easier to manage. Seemed sudden. Michael always talked about simplifying life, Maybe I'm honoring his memory by making smart decisions. Her smile was warm, sincere-looking. I nodded, thinking about the storage unit, the duffel bag, whatever she was hiding. After she went to bed, I searched the house. In the guest bathroom she'd been using, I found a burner phone taped behind the toilet tank. The contacts showed only one number, labeled K. The text messages made my vision blur with rage. December 15th. Found his backup recordings. Destroyed them. December 28th. He's getting suspicious. Moving up timeline. January 5th. Package arrived. 40 units should do it. January 20th. Gave him wrong pen this morning. Watching levels. January 25th. Done. Keep acting sad. I photographed every message. Put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. Package. 40 units. Wrong pen. The next morning, I told Rachel I was driving back to town for a few days. Needed to check on my apartment. Pay some bills. She hugged me at the door. Take care of yourself, Dad. We'll get through this together. I drove away, parked at a gas station, a mile down the road, and called Danny. I need to know everything about Michael's diabetes management. Who prescribed his insulin? Where did he get it? Danny gave me the information. Michael used Henderson Pharmacy in Billings. His doctor was Patricia Weston, an endocrinologist who'd helped him get his diabetes under control. I visited Dr. Weston that afternoon. Told her I was trying to understand what happened to my son. She shook her head sadly. Michael was one of my best patients. His A1C levels were excellent. He checked his blood sugar religiously, adjusted his insulin perfectly. His death made no medical sense to me. Could someone have tampered with his insulin? She paused. Theoretically, yes. If someone substituted a higher concentration or gave him additional doses without his knowledge, it could cause severe hypoglycemia leading to coma and death. But that would require access to his supplies and knowledge of his routine. Rachel had both. She'd been the one who picked up his prescriptions. She knew exactly when and how much insulin he took. I hired a private investigator that afternoon. Sarah Martinez, former DEA agent, came highly recommended. I showed her everything I had. She studied the documents, the photos, the text messages, her expression growing darker by the minute. This is premeditated murder, Mr. Brennan. They planned this for years. What do I need? Direct evidence of how she tampered with his insulin. Testimony or documentation proving what was in that package. Any remaining evidence of the substituted medication. Martinez leaned forward. Did they do a complete toxicology screen during the autopsy? I didn't know. I called Dr. Weston, who contacted the medical examiner's office. They'd run standard panels only. No reason to look for insulin manipulation. When the death appeared to be a diabetic complication, Martinez nodded grimly. We need to request a more detailed analysis. If there's any preserved blood or tissue, we can test for insulin concentration levels. There was. The ME's office had retained samples per standard protocol. Martinez knew a forensic toxicologist in Denver who could run specialized tests, legally, with my authorization as next of kin. While we waited for results, Martinez surveilled Rachel and Kevin. Her reports came daily, detailed, damning. They met constantly at the storage unit, moved boxes, counted cash. The duffel bags contained money, over $200,000 that Kevin had apparently been skimming from his landscaping business for years. They were building their escape fund. The insurance is being processed, Rachel said in a conversation Martinez recorded. Should have the check within a month. And the ranch? Kevin asked. I'm working on him. Old fool trusts me completely. By summer, we'll own it all. I sat in my apartment reading the transcript, and I wanted to scream. These people had murdered my son and were laughing about it, planning how to spend his money while his grave was still fresh. The toxicology results arrived on February 18th. The report was technical, full of medical jargon, but the conclusion was clear. Michael's preserved blood showed insulin levels nearly 8 times higher than his normal therapeutic dose. The concentration was consistent with an acute overdose administered within hours of death, not a gradual accumulation. My son had been poisoned with his own medication. Someone had given him a massive dose of insulin, watched his blood sugar crash, watched him slip into a coma, watched him die. I sat in my apartment reading the report, and I wept. Not just from grief, but from the cold certainty of what my boy had suffered. Someone he trusted, someone he'd built a life with, had murdered him in his own home, made it look like his disease had simply caught up with him. Martinez arranged a meeting with Detective Chen. This time, I brought everything. The emails dating back 4 years, the hidden camera footage, the text messages from the burner phone, especially the one about package, arrived and 40 units. The pharmacy records showing Rachel picked up Michael's prescriptions. And most importantly, the toxicology report showing he'd received 8 times his normal insulin dose on the day he died. Chen read each document carefully. His face changed as the evidence accumulated. When he reached the text message about 40 units, he looked up. 40 units. That's an insulin measurement, and this was sent 5 days before his death. Yes. Chen closed the folder. Mr. Brennan, I'm reopening this case as a homicide investigation. I need to keep all of this as evidence. Will you arrest her? Soon. But we need to do this right. Build an airtight case. He met my eyes. Your son deserves justice done properly. I agreed to keep silent, to maintain my cover as the oblivious, grieving father. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. 3 weeks later, I was at the ranch for what Rachel thought was a discussion about selling the property. The real purpose was keeping her occupied while police executed search warrants at the storage unit and Kevin's apartment. Rachel had made lasagna, one of Michael's favorites. The irony made me sick. So, Dad, she said, pouring wine I didn't touch, I've gotten some preliminary offers on the ranch. There's a mining company very interested. They're talking 7 figures. I pretended to consider it. That's a lot of money. It would set us both up for life. Michael would want us to be secure. I almost broke right there. Almost told her I knew everything. That she'd murdered my son for money. That she'd rot in prison for the rest of her miserable life. But I smiled and nodded and let her think she'd won. At 7:15, her phone rang. She glanced at it, frowned, excused herself. I heard her voice rise from the other room. What do you mean, police? What are they looking for? She came back ashen. Dad, I need to go. Emergency with Kevin. Can we continue this tomorrow? Of course. Everything okay? Fine. Just some paperwork issues. She left so fast, she forgot her purse. Martinez called me 40 minutes later. They found the insulin at the storage unit. 12 vials of concentrated U500 insulin, which is 5 times stronger than the standard U100 that Michael used. They also found a notebook with dosing calculations in Kevin's handwriting. He's a nurse's assistant, knew exactly how much would be lethal. A nurse's assistant. Kevin worked at an assisted living facility. He had access to medical supplies, knowledge of medications, the ability to obtain concentrated insulin without raising suspicion. They're arresting both of them tonight. I stood in my son's house, surrounded by his photos, his books, the life he'd built that his wife and her brother had destroyed for money. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something other than grief. March 7th, I sat in the courtroom gallery as Rachel was brought in, handcuffed, wearing an orange jumpsuit. The sophisticated woman who'd charmed my son was gone. She looked haggard, frightened, aged 15 years and 3 weeks. Kevin sat at the defense table beside her, both of them charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy. Rachel pleaded not guilty in a voice that cracked. Kevin pleaded the same, though his eyes were empty, defeated. The trial lasted 4 weeks. I attended every day. The prosecution built their case methodically. The forensic toxicologist testified about the insulin concentration in Michael's blood, 8 times the lethal dose. The pharmacist testified that Rachel had picked up Michael's prescriptions, would have had access to substitute vials. A former co-worker of Kevin's from the assisted living facility testified that he'd noticed missing U500 insulin vials matching the timeline of the package, arrived text message. The hidden camera footage played for the jury, showing Rachel and Kevin in Michael's office, discussing how to handle things once the old man was gone. Michael's letter was read aloud. His fear, his love, his desperate hope that I would find the truth. Several jurors wiped their eyes. The defense tried to turn Rachel and Kevin against each other. Rachel's attorney painted Kevin as the mastermind, a greedy man who manipulated his sister. Kevin's attorney did the same in reverse. But the evidence was overwhelming. The insulin was in their storage unit. The dosing calculations were in Kevin's handwriting. The text messages were on Rachel's burner phone. Their 4-year email history proved the conspiracy predated the marriage. A former colleague of Rachel's from the real estate agency testified that Rachel had specifically researched properties with mineral rights, had talked about finding a rich husband in the ranching community. On March 28th, the jury returned their verdict. Guilty. First-degree murder. Guilty. Conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty. Insurance fraud. Rachel collapsed. Kevin just stared straight ahead, expressionless. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. Life without parole for both of them. The judge addressed Rachel before pronouncing sentence. You married a good man, a man who loved you, who trusted you, and you murdered him for money, for land, for greed. You showed no mercy to Michael Brennan. This court shows you none. Rachel tried to speak, to apologize, to explain. The judge cut her off. Save it for your parole hearing in 30 years. If you live that long, they led her away in chains. Afterward, I sat in my truck in the courthouse parking lot for a long time. Reporters had wanted statements. I'd given them nothing. There was nothing to say that would matter to anyone but me. I drove to the cemetery, knelt beside Michael's grave, next to his mother's. I kept my promise, son. I found out what she did. She's going to prison forever. She won't hurt anyone else. The wind moved through the pines. Snow was falling lightly, dusting the headstones. Life continuing despite everything. I miss you every day. Your mother would have been so proud of the man you became. The business you built with Danny. The way you faced the truth, even when you were afraid. I touched his headstone, traced his name with my finger. I love you, Michael. Always will. The insurance company voided Rachel's claim the moment charges were filed. She received nothing. Kevin received nothing. The mining company withdrew their offer when the story hit the news. I kept the ranch, every acre of it. The land my grandfather cleared with his own hands. The land my father worked his whole life. The land Michael loved. It stays in the family. Danny runs the construction business now. He calls me every week, tells me about the projects they're finishing, the new contracts coming in. Michael's legacy, better than any inheritance. I moved back to the ranch full-time, sold my apartment in town. At 67, I finally stopped working, but I didn't stop fighting. Detective Chen connected me with other families, people who suspected their loved ones' deaths weren't accidents but couldn't get anyone to listen. I've helped 3 families so far, guided them through investigations, connected them with resources, showed them how to document evidence the way I learned to. 2 resulted in arrests. The 3rd is ongoing. My wife used to say I was like a dog with a bone, that once I started something, I never let go. She was right. Michael's death could have destroyed me. Instead, it gave me purpose. The justice system isn't perfect. It's slow and bureaucratic and sometimes fails entirely. But when you give it the right evidence, when you force it to see what's really there, it works. Rachel and Kevin will die in prison. They'll never enjoy a day of freedom, never spend $1 of the money they killed for, never set foot on the land they coveted. That's not revenge. That's accountability. Last month, I got a letter from a woman in Nebraska whose husband is serving life for killing their daughter. She'd seen a news story about Michael's case, recognized the pattern, finally found the courage to tell police what she'd suspected for years. They're reopening her daughter's death as a homicide. I wrote back, told her I was sorry for her loss, told her she was brave, told her that finding the truth wouldn't bring her daughter back, but it would mean her death mattered, that evil had consequences, that she wasn't crazy for knowing something was wrong. That's what Michael would have wanted. Not vengeance for himself, but protection for others. Tonight, I sit on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over the mountains. The same mountains my grandfather saw when he first claimed this land. The same mountains Michael loved, that he photographed every autumn when the aspens turned gold. I think about him as a boy, riding his first horse in this same pasture. I think about his mother, who loved this view, who would have been devastated by what happened to our son. I think about how close Rachel came to getting away with it. If Danny hadn't found that USB drive, if Michael hadn't been smart enough to document everything, if I'd been too old, too grief-stricken, too trusting to investigate, but he was smart, and I wasn't too anything. And Rachel is spending the rest of her life in a cell because she underestimated both of us. The grief doesn't go away. It's always there, a hollow place where Michael used to be. But alongside it now is something else. Not satisfaction exactly, not peace, something quieter than that. Justice served, truth uncovered, a father's promise kept. Michael, wherever you are, I hope you know. I hope you know I never stopped fighting. I hope you know that everything you feared would be buried came into the light instead. I hope you know your father loved you enough to tear apart the comfortable lies and expose the ugly truth beneath. That's what fathers do. We protect our children, even after we've lost them. We carry their memory forward. We make sure their lives mattered. And yours did, son. Yours mattered more than I can ever say. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear another story, click on the video appearing on your screen now.